In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. It's good to be with you guys again. Today, I wanted to discuss Christ as the true Passover. Christ as the true Passover. So we'll do a little bit different today. I'm kind of going to go through the rituals and rites of a traditional Jewish Passover meal. And the reason it's just been really interesting to me, and I know a lot of people as well, because we read about Christ celebrating the Passover and this happened in this cup, and it just got a little confusing. So today we're going to try to go a little deeper inside to really see what the Passover meal is, what it's about, how it started, and really how it is so clear that it's pointing to Christ. It's so clear that it's pointing to Christ. So the first Passover was back in with Exodus, in Exodus chapter 12, and Moses was pleading to Pharaoh to let his people go, right? Let my people go. And Pharaoh didn't listen. He sent plagues and this and that, and he didn't listen. So the 10th plague was slaying of the firstborn. And that one was going to happen to everybody unless they did what Moses told them about these rules for the Passover that they keep till this day. And I'm just going to read through the story really quick. And I emphasized just in bold something to keep, few things to keep in your mind, because when we talk about the traditional Passover meal that's celebrated till this day, you'll see a correlation to it. So he says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months, and it shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. Your lamb shall be without blemish, male of the first year. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month." So if the 10th of the month, say when they take the lamb or accept the lamb to the house, that's Sunday, right? Palm Sunday, when Christ, the lamb, is entering into Jerusalem, into our house. "They shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month." So they will slay it on Thursday, which is the Passover. "Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. You shall let none of it remain until morning. And what remains of it until morning you have to burn with fire. It is the Lord's Passover, for I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. 7 days you shall eat of unleavened bread, and on the first day you shall remove the leaven from your house. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said to them, Pick out and take lambs for yourselves, according to your families, and kill the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 doorposts with blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning, for the Lord will pass through to strike the Egyptians. So that's the first Passover, okay? He kind of tells them how to prepare, what to do with the meals, when to eat it, when to slay the lamb, what to do with the blood. And then he goes into a little more detail of that they should be standing, they should wear certain clothes, they should have a rod in their hand. So let's fast forward a little bit to see about preparing the Passover. Okay. The first thing that he told them to do was remove the leaven from the house. Okay. And this is known as, they kind of turned it into like a spring cleaning, what, the Jewish tradition today, where, about like a month before Passover, they are removing the chametz, the leaven from the house, because leaven represented sin, and that's what we'll talk about. So they removed it all from the house, and they had this tradition that the male of the house, the father, who was known as obviously the priest of the house, the woman had to do all the cleaning, but the guy got the credit for it. Okay, so traditionally now the mother would leave a little piece of leaven. She would hide it somewhere, and with the spoon and the feather and the candle that you see on the slide, the husband would search the house for some of that leaven. And once he would find it, he wouldn't touch it. He would brush it into the spoon with the feather. And then, back then they would go to the temple and it'd be like some burning ceremony, right? We saw Moses say, if you find anything and it's still there, burn it. So they would burn it. So they would kind of get all the credit, in the glory and celebrating of cleaning the house, while the mother or the wife did all the work. Probably the same today. But as we go on, we'll see that she's not left out. This is a resembling of Christ cleaning the temple, right? And as Mina spoke the other day about how our bodies are a temple, and that this cleansing or purification or washing is for us as well, where Christ cleansed the temple on Monday, and we have to allow Christ to come in to purify us, to clean us, to remove the leaven or the sin from us. St. Paul talks about this in the New Testament. He says, your glorying is not good. Do you know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed, Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So the first part is preparing, getting all the leaven out, cleaning the house of sin, Christ cleansing the temple, us removing and being ready to accept or start the feast of the Passover lamb. The feast starts with the lighting of the candles. And by the way, just for source purposes, I'm using mainly a lot of Jewish sources. There's a group, Jews for Jesus, who we can talk about later. Actually, one of the co-founders, Father James Bernstein, grew up Orthodox Jewish, ended up converting, and now he's part of the Orthodox Church of America, one of the founders there. And so I'm using a lot of, again, Jewish sites, as well as Melito of Sardis is writing on Pascha, and he was a father from the 2nd century. So the lighting of the candles. This was traditionally how the feast started. So the woman now the mom gets some of the glory, right? She can start the feast. She is able to bring the family together and commence the feast by lighting the candles. This is very similar, that the woman who is bringing the light to start the feast, that Virgin Mary also was the one who brought the light into the world. Virgin Mary brought the light into the world. A light for the revelation, right? That we say, and the glory to your people, Israel. So as the woman in the tradition of Passover starts the feast with the lighting of the candles, so Virgin Mary brought the light into the world. So now, as we read in Exodus, right, towards the end of that, the children gather around, and because they would do this every year. So the children would ask, what is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this feast? And the rabbi of the house would say, well, it's the Passover, and let me explain it to you. So again, traditionally now, after the lighting is set and everybody's sitting down, they basically tell the story, and it's kind of like a show and tell process throughout the rest of the night about this Exodus story, about this Passover story. So the way it starts is the children at the table ask 4 questions, and it's basically different variations of, why is this night different from all other nights? On other nights, we can eat leavened bread. How come we can't eat leavened bread today? And it's just a bunch of variations from this. And then the rabbi will say, well, let me tell you how this all started. So in traditional Passover, there are 4 cups of wine. Okay, I got a little example here, and don't worry, there's nothing in it. Okay, 4 cups. The first cup was called the cup of sanctification. And the prayer that they would say on this cup, right, they would put their hand over it, the rabbi, and before distributing it, they would say, "Blessed art thou, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, who creates fruit from the vine." Who creates fruit from the vine. This is the cup that we see Christ take up in Luke chapter 22, verse 17. And he says, after taking the cup, he gave thanks and said, "Take this and no, our normal thought is, take this, drink of it, all of you. But that's a different cup later after supper that we're going to talk about. That's the cup of redemption. So this, again, it's better to see kind of a visual to understand. So the first cup, Christ says in Luke 22:17, he says, "Take this and divide it among you. For I tell you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." So traditionally, we assume they said the prayer, "Blessed art thou, O Lord God, King of the universe, who creates fruit from the vine," the fruit from the vine that's in here, right? And then Christ says, "For I tell you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." So this is known as the first cup. Then there's something called the SEDER plate, okay? And this plate has a few items on it, and we'll kind of go through them quickly to see what they resembled in the Old Testament, and again, how we can see Christ in everything, The first is, and again, I got some tools here. So the first one is greens, and we know that green represents life, right? We have this in some of our prayers as well, but green represents life. So what happens here, they remember, and there's a bowl of water with salt in it. So what happens here first, again, this just happens step by step. They would dip life into the water with salt because it would represent tears. And this represented all the trouble that they were going through with Pharaoh and how they were beaten and enslaved and all these things, right? And that they were supposed to go to the promised land and all these things. And their life was full of tears. After this, we know that the life, it's not there forever, right? And we know that after this, the Lord delivered them through the water, where they're not in the water anymore, where they went through the Red Sea, and now they have new life. Now they have new life outside of the water, outside, and that they passed through, and they would eat of this, traditionally eat of this. The second is horseradish. Okay, horseradish is very bitter, and what they would do is, again, they would have a bowl of horseradish. I don't have any, I'm sorry. And even if I did, I wouldn't eat it. They'd have a bowl of horseradish, right? And we see here in Matthew 26 that this was the bowl that was traditionally known that Judas dipped his hand with Christ in. And again, for just again to get a visual perspective, there's a lot of things going on here. There's a lot of cups and bowls and things to eat and things to hide and whatever. So I hope this is trying to give us a better perspective to understand. In Matthew 26, he says, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The one who has dipped his hand in the bowl with me will betray me." And this bitterness is, for us, some of the resemblance of that betrayal, where it's that they are understanding for us to know that it's not obviously a good feeling to betray Christ, but that it doesn't leave a good taste in our mouth. And again, for the Jews, it was understood that this was just part of the bitter trials that they had to go through. Even they were in the wilderness and they still had to suffer, and they were complaining to Moses, "Oh, we wish we would have died in Egypt." They were still bitter. The next thing on the plate is called charoset. Charoset. And this is a sweet mixture. It's supposed to be fruit and nuts and cinnamon and honey, and they put it in this bowl to make a nice sweet mixture, but it resembles mortar, the like cement that they would use when they were enslaved to Pharaoh, right? They were enslaved and they were doing this. And then you'd ask, okay, but why would the bitterness, or it would resemble bitterness, but why is it sweet? This is to know that once that they were out of the land, they didn't see the promised land yet, but that they know that the promise of God is there. So there's a sweet ending. At the light of the end of the tunnel is sweet. And they're able to put this in their mouth, and it will wash away all the bitterness from the horseradish, right? Once they get to the promised land, once they see that this life that they were toiling for, once they get there, they would forget all of the trials that they went through and the rough times that they had once we are into the promised land. They have also either like a horseradish root or an onion root on the table that you don't eat from, is just there to, again, represent that the root of life is bitter. And again, for us, our New Testament understanding of this is that to know that the root of life is bitter, again, this is St. John the Baptist. He says, "And even now the axe is laid at the root of the trees. Therefore, every tree which does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire." Again, just to resemble that root is bitter. These next two were added after. They were not found in the original Passover. They were added after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and they're waiting for the Messiah to come again to rebuild the temple. So these two were added after. They were not found in the original Passover. The first one is the chagiga, and it is an egg, basically a hard-boiled egg, where they peel it and they slice it. They again dip it in the bitter water, the water with salt, and they eat of it. This is to represent that there's no more burnt sacrifices because the temple was destroyed. So they're upset and they're mourning that the temple was destroyed. And the last thing is a zeroa, which is the shank bone of a lamb. Again, they used to sacrifice a lamb, right? We saw Moses, he would sacrifice a lamb and they would wait and they would eat it. But now after the temple was gone, they said they're not sacrificing anymore until the rebuilding of the temple. So again, now they have a piece of lamb there, and they're not allowed, not a piece of lamb, just the bone, and they don't partake of it to, again, remember this old sacrifice. Then we move on to the second cup. The second cup is known as the cup of plagues. So what they did here, again, the cup was still full, and for each plague, for each of the 10 plagues, they would dip their finger in it and put a drop on their plate for each plague. So they would say hail, locusts, water to blood, firstborn, frogs, whatever, right? They would continue and say this 10 times, and once for each plague. So the 10th plague for us is the most important, right? And we know that this is the origination of Passover, where where Moses told them to take the blood of a lamb, slay it, and put it on the doorpost. And then at night, the angel would come and pass by, and they would come and see that a door had the blood of the lamb on it, and they would pass over that house and not kill the firstborn of that house. As here you can see just a nice picture of an angel seeing the blood and moving on. Melito of Sardis, again, the guy we were talking about before, he had a question. He said, "Tell me, angel, what turned you away? The slaughter of the sheep or the life of the Lord? The death of the sheep or the type of the Lord? The blood of the sheep or the spirit of the Lord? It is clear that you turned away seeing the mystery of the Lord in the sheep." That you saw the mystery of the Lord in the sheep, right? So they would go at the post of the door, they'd have a basin of blood of the lamb, and they would put the hyssop in it, like a reed with like branches and stuff, and they would mix it to get the blood on there. And they would put it on the lintel and the two posts. They'd mix it, they put it on the lintel and the two posts. The lintel and the two posts. And this is none other than the sign of the cross. This is really pointing directly to Christ's sacrifice. That because of his crucifixion, that we have escaped death. That we have not been bound to death anymore. And I think it's just a really beautiful reminder, again, that all these traditions really have, it's beautiful to see them come to fruition or come to fulfillment. The next is something called the MATZAH, and I have my own little homemade MATZAH here. Okay, matzah is the bread, and tash just means bag, nothing special. It's MATZAH. Okay, but it's one piece of cloth, one bag with 3 slots in it. Okay, one piece, one bag, 3 slots. Remind you of anything? 1 and 3. Okay? Each slot would have a piece of matzah bread. And obviously we know matzah is unleavened. So traditional Jewish people still debate on what this represents. They know that it means unity, but on what unity it is, people differ. Some say it's the patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Some say it's the priesthood. There's the high priest, there's the Levites, and there's the people of Israel. Some say it's the 3 angels that were with Abraham, who also we know is in the form of the Trinity. So what happens now is they take out the second piece, right? So I got 1, 2, 3, okay? They take out the second piece, not the first and not the third. They take out the second piece, and this piece is called the bread of affliction. Again, just looking at it from a Christian perspective, it's so clear that everything is pointing to Christ as the true Passover, right? The matzah is made very specifically without leaven. So again, without sin, it's not puffed up. It's pure in terms of without leaven. It's striped from the oven, and it's pierced with holes, right? There's a lot of holes in here. And as we know in Isaiah, he says, "For Christ was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities, and by his stripes we were healed." What more? By his stripes we were healed. So then what happens is they take this bread and they break it. And then there's something called the AFIKOMEN. AFIKOMEN. AFIKOMEN is just another like pouch where they would put the second piece of bread that was broken. They would hide it in here, and they would go hide it somewhere in the house. During the meal, they would just get up and hide it in the house. Now, to go back to what they're saying of how can this three represent the patriarchs or this or that, why would you take Isaac out and hide him and bury him? Why would you take the Levites out and bury them? But the second bread, the bread of affliction, and they call AFIKOMEN means he who is to come, or the one who is coming. Some of them say, and this I got from their real source, we don't know why we that they take the second one specifically to know and move it, because they don't want to confuse it with the rest of the matzahs, because there's a lot of matzah on the table, right? So they would put this away and continue eating the meal and going forward, right? So part of the game after to make sure the kids are awake, that they would go search for it. After this, once they would eat, at the end of them eating all the food after supper, the child would go and look for the AFIKOMEN. After they ate everything, they would take this, they would unwrap it, and make sure that everybody ate some. Everybody at the table would eat of the same bread, and there was nobody allowed to not eat of it, and this was the last thing that they would eat. Everybody would eat of the same bread. Let's just read again in Matthew 26. He says, while they were eating, Jesus took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take, eat, this is my body. Take, eat, this is my body. And the reference in Luke is, and he took bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Do this in remembrance of me. So what they don't know, that they've done this a few times, right? The Passover meal, the disciples, they weren't young. They've done a few Passovers. But now Christ is talking about himself, right? In the beginning, he said that this is the last time I'm going to partake of the fruit of the vine with you guys. And he's talking about himself. That as traditionally they would break this and give it to everybody, he who is to come has come. He has come, and he is with you now at the table. After this, just a side note. Again, from the Melito, again, was a 2nd century Christian. And the early Christians, obviously coming from Jewish background, were still, and that's something we can talk about another time, the Jews for Jesus, they were still culturally Jewish, right? So what they ended up doing, and this is why our Easter's calculated a little different as well, is that the slaying of the lamb was supposed to be on the 14th night. So what Melito was known at one of the early Christian families to partake of it on the 15th, because he would wait till after midnight, till after they were not allowed to eat of it anymore, for us to now slay the new lamb, the new Passover, the new AFIKOMEN, or he who comes or has come. Then we move on to the third cup, which is the cup of redemption. The cup of redemption. Okay? Cup of redemption. And we see again in Luke chapter 22, Christ says, likewise, he also took the cup after supper, right? So they had supper already. He took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you." And we say this in our liturgy, right? Drink of it, all of you, right? My blood of the new covenant. And for the first time, the disciples that were there, they heard Christ referencing the new covenant. The new covenant was mentioned before. There was a covenant with Moses that was broken. And then in Jeremiah, they were told about a new covenant. It says, "Time is coming where I will make a new covenant. I will be their God. I will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more." So the disciples are sitting at the table. They remember this old covenant that was supposed to be promised to them, and they've been waiting for it. And now Christ is with them at the table saying, "This cup is the new covenant. This is the new covenant that Jeremiah prophesied about. It's here. It's now. I am here. This is the new covenant." The last cup is known as the cup of praise, or the cup of hymn, right? The cup of praise, again, traditionally, this is still what they do at the last cup at supper, after supper. They sing from their Jewish hymnal, which is Psalms 113 to 118. Psalms 113 to 118. And we know that Jesus partook of this, right? Here in the reference with Matthew, it says, let me just read a little bit before that. "Drink from it, all of you." 26, verse 30. 29. "I tell you now, and I'll drink the fruit of this vine." And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So we knew that they partook of this last cup in singing a hymn, and then they went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, why is this part important? Psalms 113 to 118. Now, I want you to picture being at the Last Supper, knowing the Psalms before reading them, sitting with Christ, waiting, or traditionally they were waiting for the Messiah to come, and they're singing this song with Christ. They're singing this, the last Psalm, 118. They're saying, "The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation." Sound familiar? "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." To just know that this is being fulfilled in front of them, honestly, just gave me the goosebumps when I first was just reading about this. To know that after everything, before they're going out, they're going to sing this hymn. And they went through all the Psalms 113 to 118. And just picture being one of the disciples, hearing the words now and believing in that Christ, the Messiah, is here, and that everything is being fulfilled in front of you. And he's saying to them, and they're singing together, and the Lord Christ is singing, said when they had sung a hymn, they together, "The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation." We say this now. "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." The last thing that they do, unfortunately, still, they have another cup, and they leave it on the side. It's not part of the meal. It's called the cup of Elijah. And they leave it full, and the last thing that they say at the end of the night is, "Next year in Jerusalem," or they sing a praise over it, and they say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And you know what they do? They open the door and they say this, hoping that somebody will come like Elijah, or we know that John the Baptist came in the form of Elijah, right? To tell us about the one to come. So for us this week, we know that Christ is the true Passover, that the one to come has come. And all the prophecies that were to be fulfilled were made, were brought to fruition with the disciples, with them in front of them. And to really understand that everything points to Christ. Everything points to us having this this Passover feast, and to really celebrate it. And I really pray that this allowed us to get a better type of understanding of kind of how they divided the feast and what they meant. And again, just step by step really reveals who God is, who Christ is in everything. And I pray that throughout the rest of this week, as we are supposed to take communion tomorrow, or to remember that the liturgy is happening tomorrow, that Christ is slain for us. And we are preparing, and we've been preparing to partake of the Passover. And it's not he who is to come, but he has come, and he is with us. And Emmanuel, God is with us. And glory be to God forever. Amen.